Today we're going to be having a short discussion about how to get the most out of Hellblasters on the tabletop. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, the strategy focused 40k channel where we're all about getting the most out of our miniatures on the table. So Hellblasters are one of the primaris Space Marine units that quite a lot of people own. They come in the Dark Imperium box and the No Fear set, and they're already really quite iconic models. I mean, who doesn't like an entire squad of Space Marines holding dangerous plasma weapons? Unfortunately, despite all the rules that the Space Marines gained with their new codex, Hellblasters aren't necessarily left in the best spot compared with some of the other options at the moment. I personally feel that at the moment their points are just a little bit expensive for what they do on the tabletop. They don't compare amazingly versus suppressors or primaris eliminators, who are probably their closest equivalent in the primaris range. In this video we'll be having a think about how we can get more out of our Hellblasters and how to field them as optimally as possible in the game of 8th edition as it stands. Without further ado, let's get into it. So firstly let's consider the Hellblaster's strengths and weaknesses. At base, the Hellblaster squad is 33 points a model and comes in a squad of between 5 and 10. As we said, 33 points is more expensive than suppressors or eliminators, meaning that they have a far weaker defensive profile than those guys point for point, so they really are going to have to make up for it with their damage profile. The good news is that their damage output is reasonably good, though it does depend a bit on the exact variant that you choose. Plasma Fire will deal with most things in 40k, and it can be pretty guaranteed that anything that you point them at will be taking some reasonable damage from the Hellblaster squad. They have high strength, very high AP, and multi-damage should they need it via overcharging, meaning that they will deal damage to pretty much anything in the game, although they particularly have a niche at taking out elite infantry, in particular other primaris marines, which isn't actually all that bad in the current meta. You can also field them in very large units as well. At 10 points a model you could be spending a lot of points on a Hellblaster squad, and this makes them a very viable target for targeting with stratagems or one unit buffs such as Chaplain Litanies. On the downside, we already have said that they have low durability comparatively. They're only as tough as an intercessor and almost twice as expensive, so any shots that your opponent can get on a Hellblaster squad are going to be twice as valuable as against an intercessor squad in terms of killing point for point. Their range also isn't spectacular. Even on the longer ranged heavy version they're only 36 inches, and the rapid fire version doesn't become full efficiency until you get within 15. This isn't great on a not very durable unit, as it means that you're incentivized to put them right on the front line, exactly where they'd be taking the most damage. Finally, of course, they have their major weakness, which is that plasma weapons are dangerous and overheat, and each time you roll a 1 when you're firing on the overcharge profile, you'll be losing a very expensive Hellblaster. There are certainly ways to get around this, but it is problematic. Hellblasters really aren't generally all that efficient when they're just firing with their non-overcharged shots. Sure, they'll be equally good against light infantry, but light infantry isn't really what you need to be targeting with these guys if you want to make their points back. It means that you're really going to have to weigh up whether it's worth overheating it against any targets that have -1 to hit, as these will make your Hellblasters explode even more easily. If you overcharge the plasma against an Eldar flyer, you might well be doing more damage to your own squad than you do to your actual target. It really is a weakness, and it makes them a lot less flexible compared with the other primaris weapon choices such as suppressors and eliminators. So Hellblasters have 3 gun options. They have a rapid fire, assault and heavy version. In my opinion, I think that the rapid fire version is the best at the moment. It can either have 1 shot at long range at 30 inches, 2 shots at 15 inches, and you get a decent strength 7 or strength 8 depending on whether you overcharge. You're also never going to be taking a -1 to hit for moving, which is certainly decent bearing in mind those overcharges. I would say their assault version is an interesting variant, and it's the one that I'd consider next generally. These ones are assault 2 plasma incinerators with a 24-inch range and either strength 6 or 7 depending on whether you overcharge. Against elite infantry they're not really all that much worse and are often better in a lot of situations, particularly against enemies that are over 15 inches away and within their 24-inch strike range. In this bracket they're usually going to edge out the rapid fire Hellblaster, who will typically win at less than 15 inches and over 24 inches when the assault variant can't even shoot. Not being able to get to strength 8 is a bit of a kicker though. Being able to wound vehicles on 3s and wound heavy armour such as Lehman Russers on 4s is really quite good, and this really shoehorns them into just being light vehicles and heavy infantry hunters, as opposed to being really able to engage tanks efficiently. The assault nature of their weapons isn't massively helpful for mobility as well, as due to the negative modifier to hit, you don't want to be advancing and overcharging. Finally, we come on to the Heavy Hellblasters variant. This is Heavy 1 at 36-inch range with either strength 8 or 9. They're also 2 points more expensive than the other variants. They do have the benefit of long range, but they just really don't have a very good damage output compared with the assault and rapid fire variants. If you're comparing to the cheaper rapid fire variant, sure it'll only be putting out a strength 8 shot at 30-inch range, but it can do so after moving, still giving it effectively the same threat range, and sometimes you are going to need to move to get lines of sight and things. Of course, if you're within 15 inches, then the rapid fire one massively outcompetes the heavy version, just due to having more shots, meaning that it wins in all scenarios. The only niche that the heavy version actually occupies is being the best point for point against toughness 8 vehicles, and compared with some of the other Space Marine options such as las cannons for example, it just really doesn't hold up very well whatsoever. You're pretty much always going to be better off with something like a quad las contemptor, or even a bolt sniper rifle squad of eliminators when you're taking wounds off heavy armour point for point. Furthermore, you're going to take that -1 to hit penalty if you move and shoot these guys, which is never good if you're wanting to overheat, which you usually will be to get the damage 2. I honestly think that these guys would be a lot better if they were damage 2 or damage 3 depending on overcharging, but they still remain at the very mediocre damage 1 if you don't overcharge, and damage 2 if they do. Overall, I'd say that the rapid fire version is my favourite. So what sort of things can we use to stop our Hellblasters blowing themselves up? The most obvious one is to be able to reroll those ones from a Space Marine captain if you don't have another source available, such as Dark Angels staying stationary for example. The other main way is to get a +1 to hit modifier from somewhere. You can get one from a chaplain listener for example. There's signum arrays for things like Phyros or Tor Garadon, and some chapter tactics can get +1 to hit benefits such as Crimson Fists when firing against hordes or Raven Guard when firing against characters. This advantage really can't be understated in a Hellblaster squad, as being able to plug away without any fear of your guys dying in overcharge means they're just a lot more easy to use, and it means that they're somewhat resistant to -1 to hit modifiers as well. In terms of the rapid fire variant, we're really going to be wanting to try and get it within that 15-inch threat range to plug away with 2 shots, and some of the easiest ways to do that are either an impulsor or putting them in deep strike somehow. Impulsors seem like they were somewhat made to deliver rapid fire Hellblasters, being able to move and then the squad can get out, and then move, and then even after all that still plug away with their rapid fire weapons. You can even give it a shield dome to make it extra resilient, and then following that you might even be able to do some screening with the impulsor and maybe tie up nearby units. The two definitely do go well together, and you could even put a character for some reroll ones in the impulsor as well, maybe to help support multiple squads after they disembark. The other option is to try and get them with some sort of deep strike. Both Raven Guard and Deathwatch can pay command points to put them in reserve, and have them step out of nowhere to unleash some plasma death at the enemy. And this is pretty decent, as it at least guarantees that they're going to be getting one full turn of shooting without being hurt beforehand. White Scars and Space Wolves can also use this mechanic to put them on the flanks of the army, which is another solid way of keeping them off the board until they deliver their plasma payload. To be honest, these armies do seem to get overshadowed a little bit in terms of wanting to use different units for these deep strike purposes, whether it's Raven Guard Assault Centurions, Space Wolves Wolfen, or Deathwatch standard kill teams. So I'm certainly not saying they're always going to be optimal to use these on, but if you're trying to make Hellblasters work, then they seem one of the most solid ways in my opinion. Next we come on to buffs that you can give your Hellblasters in game. We talked about character support in terms of captains and signum arrays and chaplain +1 to hits. Any other rerolls that you can give them in terms of lieutenants or chapter masters are great too, although bear in mind that chapter master full rerolls give you more chance of overheating compared with standard captain rerolls, so that is a slight factor. Ancients have really good synergy with the Hellblasters because it gives them a decent chance of shooting again when they die, and they're often going to die very easily due to them blowing themselves up with their own plasma. Being able to double down on the plasma fire when one dies certainly lessens the blow somewhat, and it means with the last round of plasma fire you can also afford to overcharge it all the time because the guy is already dead. Another pretty decent synergy is the Chief Apothecary to give them a 6+ feel no pain, and you can also achieve it with some other effects such as the Salamander's Obsidian Aquila for example. By having the 6+ saving throw, it means that they're a lot more durable to things like flat damage 2 weapons, which usually go through them like butter, so this one's well worth considering. I think that Dark Angels deserve a special mention for Hellblasters. Azrael has decent synergy with them to give them a 4+ invul save to help defeat the durability problem. And of course we all know and love Weapons of the Dark Age, the one that gives them the +1 to damage. Flat damage 3 Hellblasters really do push them up into the realms where they can actually compete properly with damage output compared with other options. Provided there aren't more mobile Black Knights or Plasma Inceptors in the army, then Hellblasters are likely going to be one of the best go-tos. I should also note, even if you're not supporting them with Azrael or something, getting reroll ones as standard when they're stationary for Dark Angels again synergizes very well for Hellblasters. I thought I'd also mention Iron Hands and Iron Father Phyros in particular. We already mentioned that he's one of the bearers of a Signum array, meaning that he can give a big unit of Hellblasters +1 to hit, negating their self-exploding tendencies, and he can also give infantry nearby to him a 5+ invul save as well. So it's a good source of extra durability, explosion protection, and damage output increased all in one go. And you could even use Hellblasters in the sort of intercessor castle that people like to build with Iron Hands, where you take Iron Father Phyros and the Chief Apothecary with Father of the Future, to give the Hellblasters that obnoxious to remove 5+ feel no pain type save. In general, people like to do this more with cheaper intercessors, but a solid core of Hellblasters with this would be a still very hard to remove object, that actually deals some really scary damage output as well. Finally, on durability terms, I'd always remember transhuman physiology. Being very expensive toughness 4 models, they're quite likely to attract heavy weapons fire, particularly if you're targeted by anything like battle cannons with a strength of 8, transhuman physiology could save you the lives of a lot of Hellblasters, so in some circumstances could be very worth it on them. So for your typical squad of Hellblasters that aren't using any fancy tricks such as impulsors or deep strike to get into battle, in game I'd ideally want to be setting them up out of line of sight if you could, or at the very least in cover, well supported by any buffing characters that you've brought along for them. You don't really want them getting tagged in combat unless you've got a way to get them out of combat and still shoot, as you'll be losing a whole ton of plasma shooting, so I'd make sure that they're well screened for first turn charges and the like. From there I'd be looking to step up into line of sight turn 1 and open them up with their plasma weapons on whatever targets most present themselves to you. Naturally they're more efficient against elite infantry, but because of their general purpose nature, there's very little that they won't do decent damage to, so you can pretty much take out the highest priority targets each turn. Ideally it'd be good to threaten with multiple other units at the same time, as if you're pushing with some scary assault troops on one side, an Invicta Warsuiter on another, and also the Hellblasters, then some things are likely to get through to deal their damage. Although in general purposes you don't really want them getting charged, I wouldn't forget that they do have a primaris profile stat line, just the same as intercessors, and actually pack a reasonably decent punch in close combat, although of course they're not as efficient for it point for point. If you do have the opportunity to melt an elite unit, then punch to death a light troops unit, then there's no reason not to. I'd just be extra careful to make sure that they can actually kill whatever they're targeting, as you really don't want to be tying yourself up and denying yourself your shooting by a move that you made in your next shooting phase. For deep strike or impulsor uses, then it's likely going to be just a matter of trying to throw them at the target that they're going to have the best damage output for. I'd try and use all their range. If they have 15-inch rapid fire weapons, then you may as well deploy them at the edge of that 15 inches, rather than right up close within 9 inches as you can from deep strike, as this will keep them just that little bit safer. Again, if you can drop them in cover, or try and keep out of line of sight of most of the enemy's guns, then that's certainly a good thing too. So I hope that's been some help with the discussion of use of Hellblasters. I would personally be most tempted to try and use them in an Iron Hands castle type list. I suspect it probably won't be quite as strong as the Intercessor spam, but it could well be an interesting variant. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on Hellblasters down in the comments below, including if you found any clever ways of using them in-game that's had more of an effect than you might have otherwise thought that they might. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics for more similar content like this. And if you'd like to help out the channel, then I do have a Patreon page which is in the description below. Basically these videos take a long time to make, and the support of the patrons on Patreon is what keeps it going. So if you are enjoying regularly, then any support is greatly appreciated, and of course a big thank you to those already contributing. In any case, thank you very much for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.